At my brother's wedding, the bride smirked and told me my seat was with the kitchen staff, like I didn't belong with the rest of the guests. What she didn't know was that I owned the billion-dollar company her father was desperately relying on to save his failing empire. So with one phone call, I shattered their $50 million deal and turned their picture-perfect wedding into a public disaster they'd never forget. Welcome to AlfaRevenge, the place where real stories of betrayal, karma, and ultimate payback come alive. If you love hearing about moments when the underestimated finally rise and take control, then make sure you hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the bell icon. We've got plenty more jaw-dropping stories of revenge coming your way. Now, let me tell you mine. My name is Sarah Porter, and this story isn't just about revenge. It's about years of being dismissed, mocked, and underestimated by the very people who were supposed to support me. It all started the day an envelope arrived at my office. Thick white cardstock, gold-embossed letters, the kind of invitation that screamed old money. I held it under the bright office lights and read the words aloud. James Porter and Victoria Chen cordially invite you. I should have expected it. My phone had been buzzing for months with endless calls from my mother, bragging about the grand event she was helping to plan. According to her, it was going to be the wedding of the year. 500 guests, crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, and a bride from one of the city's wealthiest families. The irony wasn't lost on me. See, 10 years earlier, when I made the hardest decision of my life, dropping out of medical school to start my own company, James had laughed at me. Literally laughed, right at the dinner table while my parents nodded along. "Sarah's throwing her life away," he told them smugly. "She'll come crawling back home the moment she runs out of money." But I never crawled back. I worked, harder than anyone I knew. 18-hour days in a garage that smelled like burnt coffee and cold pizza. No vacations, no luxuries, just sheer determination and an idea I believed in with every fiber of my being. That tiny startup grew, little by little, into Atlas Industries, a tech empire now valued at over $2 billion. The twist? My family had no idea. From their perspective, I was just some mid-level executive at a random company. That's because I intentionally kept my ownership hidden, buried under holding companies and legal structures. To them, I was still the failure, still the embarrassment who had thrown away a respectable future. Meanwhile, my brother James was the golden child. Every promotion at Chen Enterprises, Victoria's family business, was celebrated like he had just cured cancer. Every bonus check was toasted at family dinners. He was their shining star, their pride and joy. And me? Just the invisible daughter who never dressed appropriately and wasted her potential. So when that invitation came, I should have thrown it in the trash. But my mother's voice echoed in my head from her last phone call. "Your brother is marrying into the Chen family, Sarah. Try to look presentable for once." Her words stung, but they also fueled something deep inside me. I wasn't just going to attend that wedding. I was going to remind them exactly who I had become. The sound of my assistant's voice broke my thoughts. "Miss Porter, the board meeting starts in 5 minutes. Also, Chen Enterprises sent over the final draft for the semiconductor contract. They're expecting signatures by Friday." Ah, yes, the deal. $50 million worth of semiconductors. Chen Enterprises was desperate for them. Their new product line depended on it. And they had no clue that the company they were negotiating with, the one that held their future in its hands, was mine. I smiled faintly, tucking the wedding invitation into my desk drawer. The big day arrived. The sun was blindingly bright, the kind of day made for glossy magazine covers. I wore a simple black dress, elegant, understated, but with a designer label my family would never recognize. The church courtyard was buzzing with laughter, expensive perfumes mingling in the air. My mother spotted me instantly. "Sarah," she said, her lips brushing my cheek in a fake air kiss, "you actually came, and you look presentable." Behind her, my father was deep in conversation with none other than Mr. Chen himself, Victoria's father, the so-called titan of industry. They were probably already talking business, maybe even about the semiconductor deal. If only they knew the truth. I asked where I was seated, and my mother waved vaguely at the massive seating chart. We had to make last-minute changes. Victoria's family had so many important guests to accommodate. You understand, don't you? Oh, I understood perfectly. Once again, I was the afterthought, the inconvenience, the failure. Inside, the ceremony glittered with every ounce of extravagance money could buy. Victoria floated down the aisle in a gown that probably cost more than most people's houses. James stood tall and smug, beaming like he had just won the lottery. I sat quietly in the back, unseen, watching him marry into what he thought was a family more powerful than ours. Later, the guests flooded into a grand ballroom dripping in crystal and gold. I searched for my name card among the elegantly set tables, but it wasn't there. Not anywhere. Looking for something? I turned to see Victoria, now in her reception dress, her voice sweet but sharp. "My seat," I replied evenly. Her smile widened, cruel and mocking. "Oh, didn't anyone tell you? We needed room for the more distinguished guests. But don't worry, the kitchen staff set up a lovely table in the back. You'll feel right at home there." Laughter rippled from nearby guests, and then James appeared beside her, holding a champagne glass. "Come on, sis," he said with a smirk. "Don't make a scene. You've always been good at knowing your place." That was the moment. 10 years of being underestimated. 10 years of being dismissed. 10 years of being the family embarrassment while I silently built an empire. It all came crashing down into that single second. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I smiled. Calm, controlled, deadly. And I reached for my phone. The hall smelled of roses and champagne. Chandeliers sparkled above the polished marble floor, reflecting the golden lights like stars trapped in glass. Waiters in crisp white shirts floated across the room, carrying trays of wine and delicate appetizers. Guests whispered, laughed, and complimented each other's expensive outfits. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked grand. Everything looked like a dream. But for me, it felt like a nightmare I had been invited to on purpose. I walked slowly toward the reserved seating area, my heels clicking against the floor, echoing louder than the orchestra in my head. My brother, the groom, looked radiant in his tuxedo, smiling widely as people surrounded him with congratulations. His bride, draped in pearls and diamonds, held his arm tightly like she was clinging to a trophy she had finally won. I reminded myself to breathe. After all, I was his sister, part of the family. I had every right to be here. But the moment the bride's eyes landed on me, her expression changed. Her smile froze. Her eyes narrowed. And then, just like she had rehearsed it, her lips curled into a cruel smirk. She leaned closer, her voice dripping with arrogance, and said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Oh, your seat isn't here? You'll be with the kitchen staff. That's where you belong." The words sliced through the air like glass shattering on marble. For a moment, I thought I misheard her. But then, laughter followed. Guests covered their mouths, some smirking, others whispering. Even my parents shifted uncomfortably but didn't say a word. Not to defend me, not to protect me. No. They simply looked away, embarrassed. Not for me, but for themselves. Their silence screamed louder than her insult. My heart pounded in my chest. My face burned hot with humiliation. Every second I stood there felt like hours, like the spotlight had been yanked off the bride and groom and placed cruelly on me. Forced my lips into a smile, though it felt like my skin was cracking. With measured steps, I turned away. My legs felt heavy, but I kept walking, each step dragging me closer to the back of the hall, closer to the place they thought I belonged, with the staff, the invisible workers, the people no one noticed. And yet, deep down, I wasn't breaking, I was calculating. Because here's what no one in that room knew. While they mocked me for being the unmarried sister, while they whispered about how I wasn't as successful as my brother, while they treated me like a burden, I had built something far greater than they could imagine. Behind the scenes, away from the glittering lights and fake smiles, I had carved out a life of power. I had created a company worth billions. I had become someone people feared to cross in boardrooms and contracts. I wasn't loud about it. I didn't flash wealth the way my family worshipped it. I stayed quiet, private, underestimated. And because of that, they had no idea who they were laughing at. Not a failure, not a joke, but the silent storm that would drown them all. I sat at the edge of the hall, away from the laughter and clinking glasses. My hands trembled, not from shame, but from rage coiling like a serpent in my veins. I watched the bride bask in her glory, sipping champagne like she had already won every battle that mattered. I saw my brother smile blindly, unaware of the poison he had married. They thought I was nothing. But in my clutch bag rested the one weapon they couldn't see, my phone. On that phone was a contact who owed me everything. a man whose empire relied on me, and another man, the bride's father, who desperately needed that same man to save his crumbling business. The irony was delicious. The bride who thought I belonged with the staff was about to find out that I was the one person standing between her family's empire and total collapse. I pulled out my phone slowly, my fingers brushing across the smooth screen. The orchestra played a cheerful tune in the background, violins singing like nothing was wrong, like this night was destined for joy. But in my head, another soundtrack played. The sound of walls crumbling, contracts burning, and lives falling apart. I scrolled to the contact. My thumb hovered over the call button. My heart no longer raced with humiliation. It pulsed with power. I realized that in this single moment, I held the strings to their future. One call, one command, and their perfect little fairy tale would turn into a nightmare they could never escape. I looked up once more. The bride laughed with her bridesmaids, her pearls glimmering under the chandelier. She looked untouchable, invincible. She thought she had won. But storms don't announce themselves with thunder right away. They start quietly, with a shift in the air. And I was about to shift everything. I took a deep breath, pressed the green button, and raised the phone to my ear. As the first ring echoed, I smiled for the first time that night. Not the fake smile I forced when they mocked me, but a real one. Because I knew they were laughing at me now. But very soon the entire hall would be watching them fall. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. My thumb tapped against the side of the glass, steady but eager. And then, on the 4th ring, I heard the familiar deep voice on the other end. "Miss Hart, I didn't expect a call from you tonight." It was Mr. Collins, the CEO of a multinational firm. A man with sharp instincts, known to devour competitors in silence. But when it came to me, his tone was never commanding. It was respectful, grateful. Because he knew one truth. His empire would not have survived the last 3 years without my company. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. My eyes were locked on the bride, who was clinking her glass with my brothers in a toast. Everyone around them cheered, oblivious to the storm that was seconds away. "Mr. Collins," I said calmly, "you know that partnership proposal with Whitmore Enterprises?" A pause, then a careful answer. "Yes. They've been desperate to close the deal. We're supposed to finalize it first thing tomorrow morning." My lips curved into a smile that no one in that hall could see. "Cancel it." He inhaled sharply. "Cancel, but no buts," I cut in. "Terminate all negotiations immediately, and make sure word gets out tonight. I want the markets to know before sunrise." There was silence on the line. Heavy, weighted silence. And then the sound of his voice lowering, almost like a bow. "Consider it done." I hung up. That was it. One call, less than a minute. But the ripple it unleashed would sink an entire empire. I slid my phone back into my clutch just as the bride's father, Charles Whitmore, stood up for his grand toast. The crowd applauded as he tapped his glass, his face glowing with pride and false confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice booming through the speakers, "tonight is not just about my daughter's marriage, it's about the union of families, a celebration of legacy, of power, of building a future together." People cheered, glasses lifted high. He soaked in their admiration like a man who believed the universe bent to his will. But as he spoke, his phone buzzed on the table beside him. He glanced at the screen. His smile faltered for half a second, but he quickly pocketed it and continued. Another buzz, then another. This time, his hand twitched. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms, watching every flicker of discomfort ripple across his face, because I knew exactly what those messages said. His billion-dollar deal had just crumbled. His lifeline had been severed. Within minutes, whispers spread across the hall. Guests who worked in finance began checking their own phones, their faces shifting from joy to shock. The air shifted, just like a storm cloud blocking out the sun. Charles's voice cracked mid-sentence. His forehead glistened with sweat under the chandelier light. Tonight we celebrate." His words stumbled. He reached for his wineglass, his hand trembling slightly. Then, finally, his phone buzzed again, this time so loudly it echoed into the microphone he held. A cruel coincidence. Guests laughed lightly at first, thinking it was harmless. But I saw the way his eyes widened when he read the latest notification. His empire wasn't just shaken, it was collapsing. I could almost hear his heart pounding from across the room. The bride noticed too. She leaned toward him, whispering, but he shook his head violently, his hand gripping the glass so tightly it nearly shattered. My brother, confused, tried to laugh it off, but the unease was spreading like wildfire. "What's happening?" I heard someone murmur nearby. "Why are Whitmore stocks tanking right now?" Another voice. "The Collins deal just got canceled, effective immediately." And then, like poison dripping into water, the whispers grew louder, faster, until the entire hall was buzzing. I sat perfectly still, calm, smiling, watching, because this was my revenge. Not screaming, not fighting, not begging to be respected, but sitting in silence while the very people who mocked me crumbled under the weight of their arrogance. The bride's pearls didn't shine as brightly anymore. Her laughter faded. She clutched my brother's arm tighter, panicked, whispering something into his ear. He looked lost, trying to comfort her, but his eyes kept darting toward her father, who was now on his phone, shouting into it, his toast forgotten. The guests weren't paying attention to the couple anymore. All eyes were on the downfall. The whispers turned into conversations, and the conversations into rumors that would spread across the city by morning. I leaned closer to the woman seated beside me, pretending to be curious. "What's happening?" I asked softly. She shook her head wide-eyed. "Charles Whitmore just lost a $50 million deal at his daughter's wedding." Her words were music to my ears. The bride's perfect little fairy tale had been rewritten in real time. The humiliation they planned for me, seating me with the staff, mocking me like I didn't belong, was nothing compared to the disaster unfolding before their guests. And the best part? They had no idea I was the storm behind it. I picked up my glass of champagne, raising it slightly toward the bride and groom. From across the hall, the bride met my eyes. For a split second, she looked at me differently. The smugness was gone, replaced by fear, by suspicion. Did she know? Maybe, maybe not. But it didn't matter, because the damage was done. I sipped my drink slowly, savoring the moment, the bubbles dancing on my tongue like victory. Around me, the once celebratory hall was now filled with chaos. Phones buzzing, guests murmuring, the father of the bride unraveling before everyone's eyes. And all I did was sit quietly in the shadows, smiling like the storm had passed. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Because real revenge doesn't end with one ruined wedding. It lingers. It grows. And in part 4, they would realize that this was only the first domino to fall. The wedding ended, but not with the cheers and music that were planned. The band played awkwardly as guests shuffled out, whispering about stock market crashes and broken deals instead of tossing rose petals and wishing the couple well. The bride's father, Charles Whitmore, had vanished halfway through the reception, dragging 2 of his business partners into a side room. His voice had echoed down the corridor, loud and desperate as he tried to salvage what couldn't be saved. By the time the newlyweds cut their cake, his company's reputation was already bleeding across the headlines. Whitmore Enterprises deal canceled. Stocks crash 18% in 1 hour. Rumors of bankruptcy ahead. The whispers followed him out the door, clinging to his expensive suit like smoke. And though he didn't know it, every ember had been lit by me. When I stepped outside that night, the cool air hit my skin like freedom. My heels clicked on the pavement, steady, controlled. Behind me, the golden glow of the hall flickered like a dying flame. I could still hear faint echoes of laughter, but it wasn't the same laughter that had mocked me earlier. Now it was nervous, uneasy, a crowd watching a kingdom fall. And oh, how satisfying it felt. The next morning, chaos unfolded in full view of the world. Newspapers splashed Charles's downfall on the front page. News anchors spoke of betrayal, sudden cancellations, and a family empire collapsing overnight. His investors fled, his partners distanced themselves, and the once untouchable man was suddenly toxic. At breakfast, I scrolled through the headlines on my tablet while sipping coffee, the steam rising lazily into the air. Each article tasted sweeter than the sugar in my cup. But what made it perfect wasn't just his downfall. It was the silence in my own home. My parents, who had laughed when the bride mocked me, sat at the table pale and speechless. My mother stirred her tea absent-mindedly, her spoon clinking too many times against the cup. My father hid behind his newspaper, though I could see his hands trembling as he pretended to read. They knew. Maybe not the details, maybe not the call, but they felt it, that I was connected, that somehow the daughter they dismissed had more power than they could imagine. And for the first time in years, they were afraid of me. The bride and my brother returned from their honeymoon early. Not because they wanted to, but because there was no honeymoon. The lavish trip had been canceled by Charles himself, his accounts frozen as he scrambled to save his company. When I saw them weeks later, they weren't glowing newlyweds anymore. The bride's diamond smile had dulled. Her designer clothes couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. My brother tried to play the role of supportive husband, but I could see the cracks forming in his mask. He had married into chaos, into a family drowning, and he was struggling to breathe. At a family dinner, the silence was thicker than the food on our plates. No one dared to mock me anymore. No snide remarks about my single status. No laughter at my expense. Instead, they stole glances at me, curious, nervous. The bride, especially. Her gaze lingered, sharp and suspicious, as though she was trying to piece it all together. And maybe she had. Maybe she realized that her little act of humiliation at the wedding had unleashed a storm far bigger than she could handle. But she never asked, because asking would mean admitting she knew I was capable of destroying her world. Charles Whitmore's empire collapsed within months. The $50 million deal was just the beginning. Other partnerships crumbled. Lawsuits followed. His wealth drained like sand through an hourglass. The man who once stood proudly before hundreds at his daughter's wedding was now a ghost, hiding from reporters. His mansion on the market, his name whispered with pity instead of respect. And me? I grew stronger. My company soared, my influence spread, and doors that once closed on me now opened with eagerness. People who ignored me before now begged for meetings. They shook my hand like it was gold. They smiled at me the way they once smiled at Charles. It was poetic. The woman they thought belonged with the kitchen staff had quietly taken her seat at the head of the table, and no one dared to move me again. But revenge isn't just about a single victory. It's about rewriting the balance of power. And as I sat in my office one evening, overlooking the city lights, I realized something important. They still didn't know the truth. Not fully, not clearly. They suspected, they whispered, but they didn't know. And maybe that was even sweeter, letting them live with uncertainty, letting them wonder if every downfall, every closed door, every whispered rumor in the future was my doing. But part of me wanted the reveal. To look the bride in the eye and let her know that the night she tried to humiliate me was the night she doomed her family. That the sister she dismissed had been her executioner all along. And that thought, the temptation of the reveal, made me smile as the city lights glittered below. This was just the aftermath. The storm had passed, but the destruction remained. And little did they know, I wasn't finished yet. The weeks after the wedding were a blur of headlines, meetings, and chaos. Chen Enterprises' collapse was all over the news. Articles called it the fall of a dynasty. Stock prices plunged, investors pulled out, and the once untouchable Chen family was now clinging to scraps of their reputation. As for my brother James, his fairy tale marriage ended almost as quickly as it began. Victoria filed for annulment within 2 months, blaming him for dragging her into ruin. The woman who once smiled sweetly while humiliating me at her wedding now couldn't bear to have James anywhere near her perfect image. And my parents? The people who once bragged endlessly about James's promotions and bonuses? They went silent. Their phones, which used to ring with dinner invitations and charity gala RSVPs, stopped ringing altogether. No one wanted to be associated with a family tied to scandal, debt, and fraud. Meanwhile, I was busier than ever. Atlas Industries, my company, took over Chen Enterprises piece by piece. The assets that mattered, I absorbed. The employees who had worked hard but suffered under bad leadership, I kept. The corruption, the dead weight, the arrogance, I discarded. For the first time, people looked at me with respect, not pity. Business journalists called me the quiet architect of a corporate empire. Investors fought for a chance to work with Atlas. And yet, none of that gave me the satisfaction I felt when I thought back to that wedding day. The day I was told to sit with the kitchen staff. Because that day, I proved something. Not just to my family, but to myself. That the girl they laughed at, the dropout they dismissed, the disappointment they ignored, had outbuilt them all. But just when I thought the story was over, the past came knocking at my office door. It was a Tuesday morning when Clara, my assistant, walked in looking nervous. "Miss Porter, you have an unexpected visitor." I didn't look up from my quarterly reports. "Who?" She hesitated. "Your mother." I froze for a moment, then sighed. "Send her in." The door opened, and there she was, my mother. But not the woman I remembered. She looked smaller somehow. Her designer clothes were last season, her jewelry understated, and for the first time in my life, she looked unsure of herself. She sat down across from me without asking. "The receptionist didn't even recognize me," she said softly. "I had to show my ID to prove I was your mother." "That's security protocol," I said calmly. "We've had interesting visitors since the takeover." Her eyes darted around my office, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the sleek furniture, the awards lined up on the shelves, all symbols of the empire she never believed I could build. Finally, she looked back at me. "Sarah, your father and I have been doing a lot of thinking about how we treated you, about what we failed to see." I kept my voice neutral. "And?" She swallowed hard. "We were wrong, so terribly wrong. We thought success looked like James, flashy, polished, the golden boy. We didn't understand that real success was what you were quietly building, and for that, we are ashamed." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Part of me wanted to laugh. Another part wanted to cry. I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city skyline. Pride is easy when success is visible, Mother. The question is, would you have been proud of me when I was working out of a garage, eating ramen noodles, wearing the same clothes every day because every dollar went into the company? "No," she whispered. "We wouldn't have, and that's our shame to carry." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then I turned back to face her. "James called yesterday. He wants a job at Atlas." Her eyes flickered with hope. And I told him the same thing he told me 10 years ago. "Get a real job. Stop relying on family connections." She flinched but nodded slowly. "He's living in our guest room now. Victoria's family won't speak to him. It's been humbling." I studied her for a long moment, then pressed a button on my phone. "Clara, bring in the package." Moments later, Clara returned with a thick envelope. I slid it across the desk to my mother. She frowned, opening it. "What is this?" "A fresh start," I said simply. "Information about Atlas's small business loan program, affordable real estate listings, contacts for trustworthy advisors. If you and Dad want to build something real, here's your chance. But no shortcuts, no special treatment. If you want success, you'll earn it the way I did, through work, not appearances." Her hands trembled as she clutched the envelope. "After everything, you'd still give us this chance?" "I'm not giving you anything," I corrected. "I'm offering an opportunity. What you do with it, that's on you." She stood slowly, tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Sarah, for the opportunity and for the lesson." As she reached the door, I added one last thing. "Oh, and Mother, that kitchen table at James's wedding. Best seat in the house. It's where you see people's true colors." She paused, nodded, and left quietly. That was the last time I saw my mother in my office. My parents eventually opened a small boutique with a loan they qualified for. Not glamorous, not high society, but something real. For once, they worked for what they had. James found a job months later. Not as an executive, not as the golden boy he always pretended to be, but as a junior analyst in a small firm. A humbling start, exactly what he needed. And me? I stayed focused on Atlas. We grew stronger, more respected, more unstoppable. But through it all, I kept one reminder in my office. The old workbench from my garage. The place where it all began. Because revenge isn't just about making others eat humble pie. Sometimes it's about reminding yourself why you fought so hard in the first place. And sometimes the sweetest revenge is making them eat that pie at the kitchen table they once set for you.